Bonjour. Hello. I'm excited and a little nervous. I'll warm up, but I'm really, really honored to be here. I can't, words don't quite capture what it feels like to be in a room of educators, of passionate people about being with children and young people. It's my passion. So I'm filled with gratitude that I have this opportunity to be here and speak with you today. I'm just going to move this mic a little bit. Can you still hear me if I'm backed off from the mic? That's okay? All right. I want to begin just by acknowledging where we are. And we're on the traditional unceded territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. I have been a visitor on this territory for 20 years, and I'm continually humbled, surprised, grateful for the generosity, the kindness, and the continued opening that I receive from people whose land we're on. The Snuneymuxw First Nation, their traditional territory was over 100,000 hectares. That was just part of their own traditional territory. They also shared another 100,000 hectares with a variety of nations in this area. Today, there's 4 small pieces of land, one of the most densely populated communities in this province. Some of you may know Departure Bay, which was the site of a village and a burial ground. A 7-Eleven is there now. And as you drive to the ferry, there used to be a hotel called the Moby Dick, and that was the site of a village where the channel was really narrow between Newcastle and Nanaimo. Part of why it's important for me, it's protocol. It shows respect to acknowledge the land we're on, but for me it's even more important than that because I am of settler ancestry. My family comes from Scotland and Ireland and England. On my mother's side, the MacNeil clan that moved here when England was colonizing Scotland. And my family was given 200 acres of land to settle by Colonel Talbot in Ontario. That's the Munsee Nation's land. And I'm reminded what land does to a family, the kind of privilege that kicks off a family history if you've been bestowed a few hundred acres of land to work on. If you imagine now newcomers to Canada being offered 200 acres of land, what a difference that would make in an immigrant or refugee's life. So, because of so many different privileges I stand with, I am constantly needing to remember and remind myself that I'm in a process of decolonizing myself, which is another reason to talk about where we are. And I think in the culture and the movement of Me Too, where all of us are wanting a culture of consent in everything we do, it's vital to remember consent was never given to what's happened on these lands. So we're going to see if this works. Oh, so there's, some of you know this beautiful river that the First Peoples here and still depend on, right? The salmon as part of a cycle of life and a relationship. And today I want to talk about relationships. I had a fabulous conversation before coming up about generational ideas of teaching and how hopeful it is that young people, that maybe some of the ideas I'm bringing today won't be new at all. And that's actually really hopeful for me, that this will be like, oh yeah, I know that. I really, really want to thank the people that have invited me. I feel really honored and grateful to have met Lucy Ferrari. Where is she? Lucy? Yeah, can we give Lucy a hand for all her organizing? And Anik Zubey, where's Anik? She's in the, can we give Anik, please, a warm, she has been emailing and organizing, and I know that those are only two women that I've been fortunate to connect with. I know there's many more people involved in putting together such an event, inviting you all, organizing the venue. I'd really like to thank Yvonne Rigsby-Jones, who's a Snuneymuxw elder in residence, who was welcoming everyone today. I'm really honored that you're here. And I'd like to know, maybe just give me a little sound. How many here are teachers sort of 5 years or less? Just give a hand. Whoa! Okay, wait. How many are attending teachers' college right now, or teacher training? Cool. That's exciting. There's so many people here who are brand new. And how about now, people that are working in the field under 5 years or less? Thank you. Huh. It's not really working, that slide. So I know what you do is connection. I know what you do is relationship. I'm from a family of teachers, as Lucy mentioned. My mother was a teacher, and I want to talk about my hopes and intentions today for what I may speak of, what I may bring. I'm hoping what I will talk about will be of use somehow. I'm hoping that it will be encouraging to you. I'm hoping that there may be some information or a piece of knowledge that you can take away with you that's helpful. And I really want to, give a message of support and encouragement and celebration for what you do, because on this day and age in the planet, we need to find reasons to celebrate. So the theme of the talk is relationship. The one you have with yourself, the one you have with your students, and the one that you have with each other's and community members. I grew up with my family life infused with school. Both my parents were teachers. The talk at the dining room table was all about our day at school. I grew up witnessing how hard teachers work, how passionate they are about what they do, how much they bring home from what happens during their day. I grew up understanding that unions are a fabulous, necessary thing, and that the teachers' union does so much, because teachers that are supported means supported students. I grew up knowing that, and believing, actually, that class sizes bigger than 10 are actually untenable. I know there's been a recent victory about class size. I still believe the ratio in a classroom should be what it is on a field trip for student to teacher. That's my mom. She's still alive. She's 85. She taught grade 4-5, and she was my first teacher and a brilliant woman. She still is a brilliant woman. She was a brilliant teacher. Her mother went to normal school, my grandmother, and in doing some research for this talk, I came across a woman I hadn't heard about, but she's my great-great-aunt, Annie, who was also a teacher. And she was one of the first women in Ontario who refused to leave teaching once she got married. Why do you think they asked teachers, female teachers, to leave teaching once they got married? Husbands supported them. Yeah, that could have been part of it, yeah. Any other ideas? Go home and raise their kids. It also had to do with they might end up pregnant. And now you'd have to talk about what's going on in the classroom if a teacher showed up suddenly pregnant in front of their students. That wasn't a conversation that was in schools. Things have changed, haven't they? So I want to give you a moment, because I need a moment to get settled too. I'm still really nervous. I'd like you to think about a teacher in your life and what it was about that teacher, how you felt with that teacher. And I want you just to turn to someone at the table and take about 2 minutes, introduce yourself. This is a positive experience with a teacher, right? Someone you really, really cared about and remember. We're not talking about those that we'd leave behind in the dust. I'll give you 3 minutes. Introduce yourself, share. So just tell me some of the things that you heard. What was it about the teacher, how you felt in their presence? I don't think we need a mic, just kind of shout out. I can repeat what I hear you say. Encouraging you. Say again? The same? Safe. Yes. Dedicated. Passionate. Capable. How did you feel with them? Let me hear a few adjectives. You felt safe, you felt encouraged. Pardon? You felt important. I felt like I was a real person, which maybe a lot of children don't, right? We still really disrespect children in so many ways in our culture. Recognized. Loved, even loved. Empowered. Wow. It's probably why you're all here, right? You had that experience with someone that stood out in your life, someone who saw you, who created safety and relationship and treated you like a real person. You know, when we're not safe, we can't learn and we can't connect. And when we're not present to ourselves or with each other, we can't create relationship. It's part of our neurobiology. I'll just briefly talk about that. And none of this will probably be new to you, but I want to think about and have you think about what does that look like in the rooms you're in with the young people you're with. So this next section is not so much fun because I'm going to name some things that I think are part of the context on the planet. They're not our whole context, and I'm not going to end on such a note. But I do think if we kind of pretend certain things aren't happening, we can't really address them and we can't really understand ourselves. So we live in an intense culture of victim blaming, no matter if it's poverty, sexual violence. The things land at the doorstep and on the bodies of people who are suffering. We really pathologize responses to violence. People respond and interact and resist violence in so many ways, but we give them a string of diagnoses. I won't maybe comment on all of these, but the colonial context isn't history, it's current. Indigenous cultures and the colonial reality are still very much meeting each other. There isn't any reciprocity, and we can see legally across the country what's happening, and right now in the territories when oil is wanted, what happens to Indigenous sovereignty. I put quotes around child protection because right now there are more Indigenous children in care than during the 60s scoop. And again, poverty can be a reason to remove and further traumatize and damage a family. This is a system that is severely broken. And you're under legal obligation to call them if you think a child is at risk. This is a problem. The biggest social experiment with children is happening right now, in that they're being medicated with substances never tested on children, because that's not ethical. We can't test drugs on children, and yet we're handing them out en masse. You know, it goes on, right? There's so much fear of new people coming to this country, and people like me with white skin privilege who have been here, 150 years, have the gall to talk about who can belong and who's allowed. We live in a deeply supremacist culture, all of our institutions. Misogyny and violence against women and LGBTQ two-spirit people are off the charts. We're just hearing about it now is all in the era of Me Too. We're just hearing about it. Capitalism that knows no limits is hitting the limit of our planet. And we kind of are on a bit of a time frame here. So I don't really wonder when I hear about rising rates of anxiety in the classroom in children. You know, children are hardwired to read us. That's biologically what needs to happen. They don't really listen to us, they read us, they feel us. So how unsettling can it be for children if they realize the adults don't know what to do and don't have it together? Anxiety to me is a pretty healthy, that's a sign of mental health for a child to feel anxious. You know, I talked to a young woman today, and I mean, online culture, generation, you know, I'm an old lady. So I didn't grow up being able to connect online with people around the world, and in some ways, that can break isolation. I've talked to trans and gay youth that have found community very far away from them, from their small rural town. But we also have to recognize loneliness in this culture of connectivity is skyrocketing. People feeling alone and not connected. And, you know, addiction is also a pretty natural response to anxiety and stress. It's not a disease. That's what happens is we want to numb out when things hurt too much and when we're too lonely. And, you know, we have no sure future ahead of us. That's part of the context that we're in. That's part of the context of the young people in your classrooms. So it makes a lot of sense, you know, that we might not want to talk about it so much, or just that we feel incredibly overwhelmed. So I want to try something, because that was just sort of a lot of things that I think all of you know about. I don't think this is like new information, but maybe we don't put it all up on a screen and think about it all at once. So I'm just going to invite you to follow a little exercise with me. And I do this in every class that I'm in. And I know that mindfulness is working into all the classes that you're in, but I want to invite teachers to do it, and regularly. So just feel your feet on the ground. If you have your legs crossed, maybe just put them both on the ground. You know, if it feels safe and comfortable, maybe put away your phones and close your eyes. And if it doesn't feel safe to close your eyes, then just limit your visual field, because we're so wired visually. So maybe just kind of glance down at the table so you're not distracted by other people. And you might even want to wiggle your toes so that you actually feel the ground underneath you coming up and supporting you. And notice that your butt is on probably a softer chair. Usually I have to say those hard blue chairs that kids are sitting on in elementary schools or high schools, but the chair's supporting you. And notice everywhere that your body is connecting with the chair. Your back, tops of your thighs. And just become aware of the sounds in the room and outside of the room. Just locating yourself in the here and now. Notice the temperature on your skin. Notice if your thoughts are racing, or just the quality of your thoughts. Maybe you're delivering a workshop next and you're kind of going, okay, get on with it, lady, I've done this before. Just maybe you're thinking about what was. See if you can notice that you're taking a breath, that your chest is rising and falling. See where it's more helpful for you to notice, if it's noticing your chest or your belly or your nose where the air might be coming in and out of. What would it feel like if you just imagine that gravity's kind of pulling your muscles off of your bones to make you just that much heavier in space and time and a little more grounded in this moment? And I just invite you to, again, notice the sounds in the room and around you. And if your eyes are closed, just gently open them and just kind of let your gaze rise slowly and take in some of the room. Maybe do a little 360, look around, see the folks in the room, notice the lighting. I think that we live in a really distracted culture. I'm rarely in the moment that I'm in. And we wear multitasking like a badge of honor, as if that's some really great thing to do. Being present with young people is probably, I believe, the best gift you can give them, is actually being in your body in the moment. It's the only time we have any control over how we respond. And there's a million points in a day to respond and react to children, because your own childhood is responding with them, and your belief systems and your biases and everything else that you are is interacting with the young people you're with. And if you're not home, then you're going to do and say some things you're probably not going to feel good about. I've reacted quickly and in anger to a child that was teasing another child. It was such a crappy response. I still feel really bad about that. It hit me so hard to see how much fun they were making of this young girl. It was grade 6 class. It was in a classroom and a school in a really wealthy area. And this girl lived in a trailer park, and the kids could smell it in grade 6. They understood class difference. She didn't have the right clothes. There was something about her that didn't fit. Her teeth weren't quite right. And when she danced the Highland Fling at a lunchtime, sort of talent show, and made a funny face because she was so focused on what she was doing. And when you focus on what you're doing, whatever it is, your face is going to look, you're not going to care. And when I entered the room and saw one of the more privileged boys in the class imitating and making fun of her and the other kids laughing, I kind of lost it. Get out here right now, right? Into the hall. Don't you ever. I was my father. My father was a teacher, but he was a pretty authoritarian, kind of frightening man. And suddenly I was Bill Myers, like whoosh, right? I didn't know that about myself. I didn't know that I had this thing about being bullied because I was bullied by my dad. I didn't know how intensely I was going to respond and react from such a place of empathy with the young girl, but boy, did I want to hurt that little boy in some ways, right? I wanted to diminish him, and wow, what a teachable moment. I bet that was for him, hey? So, I say that not because I think I'm a bad and terrible person, and all of you may have stories of these moments of reacting. But the more that you can be in you, it gives you a moment to breathe and then respond in a way that you might really feel good about. Because we don't teach when we're angry. Anger doesn't really teach anything except anger and fear. So knowing for yourselves, what helps you be present? Taking a breath does for me. Somebody else might need to go to their car and smoke. There's no, what helps you be in the moment, right? People smoke because they're breathing deeply, right? Right? They really take deep breaths. We're pathologizing smokers all up and down, right? Like we've decided that's a terrible addiction. Being on your phone apparently isn't, right? But what helps you, and know that about yourself, because that's a tool that's really helpful to use. And you can't teach kids about it if it's something that you don't really know, but you can learn with them. So I just like that. I just like Calvin and Hobbes. But I do want to talk about self-awareness You know, I'm cisgendered, you know, I identify as female, I look female, I have white skin, I'm living middle class. I have an invisible disability from a brain aneurysm, but I don't have a physical disability, so I'm able-bodied. And that means that there's lots of things lots of information that has come to me that makes up part of me that I can't see 360 because I have an incredible amount of privilege in all of those different intersecting locations that I have. This, for an example, so this was the textbook in my grade 6 class, Mr. Murphy's grade 6 class. I finally found it online, and you can actually buy it, breastplate and buckskin. Yeah, I was in grade, we don't have to say, it was a long time ago. I was in grade 6. But, you know, Indigenous people were savages, absolutely written in the textbook and taught as a fact. And, you know, here they are dressed like devils with Cartier, the savior. So, you know, I can't swim without getting wet. I can't live in a racist culture without some of it being infused within me. I can't live in a culture that's fear of difference and not somehow have taken some of it in. So know what you've taken in, because an inclusive classroom can only be as inclusive as actually we are. So context matters. Our context right now on the planet matters, and your personal context does matter to the young people you're with. Many of you know sort of about trauma-informed classrooms and trauma-informed practice. It's kind of a meta movement that's like sweeping across our province. I have some critique. I think it's too biology-based, you know. Violence and abuse happens in our social reality, not in our brains. But we do know that when we're afraid, we can't learn. You know, a part of our brain, the amygdala, gets fired up and shuts down learning. And long exhalations and deep breathing is the only thing that sends our body a message to relax and rest and open up and feel safe and learn. And teachers, like yourselves, understand that unlike the medical model, we don't parcel off what we think and our bodies and our feelings. We are whole, we are connected. I asked my mother, my father recently died, so I was home for the celebration of life, and I said, Mom, I'm gonna be speaking to a whole bunch of new teachers. If you were there, what would you say? My mother doesn't know anything about this new BC curriculum. You know, she's been out of teaching for 20 some odd years, and this is what she said. People tend to want to focus on the subject matter, maybe because it's easy, maybe it's because, you know, we're passionate about the thing that we're teaching, but they forget that they're teaching a whole person. And I know it's kind of a buzz. It's like, friend me on Facebook. You know, these words get used that don't have any meaning anymore. But I thought that was interesting, that my mother just completely, not out of knowing that that's kind of something that you're talking about nowadays, wanted to pass along to you. I work with children and youth that experience violence, children and youth that from 3 to 18 years old, and I'm a partner in classrooms now. You know, I went to school at Queen's in the concurrent program and taught a bit and went overseas and taught, came back many years later, came to BC. They wanted me to update my degree, so I've done Teachers College twice. Imagine that. We won't talk about Teachers College today, but this is how many kids, this is a Canadian statistic, that will be in your classroom between 3 and 5 who aren't safe at home. That's just a reality. And you may not know it because they may be super high achievers and extremely pleasing and get 100% on every test, and you have no idea maybe what is motivating that. They may be the kids that are quote-unquote disruptive or resistant, acting out, you know. And they may be the kids that never get noticed because they're just silent and invisible and quiet. And given that statistic, some of you were likely in that situation as well. So here's just a few images to bring a little bit of some of how those kids can feel. This was a note kind of stuffed into my hand, a disclosure in a classroom. And it may be hard to see from there, but the grade 7 student has written a little, like a key that says bruise. There's a little mark. And then she's written on the body, it says family member at the top. This was her disclosure that this was happening at home. There's a lovely sun in the corner, but that little picture says mom and me. And I'm always struck by the vastness of the space and the tininess of that little person. Kids are receiving bizarre messages about love when they write, the guy is yelling, I'm going to shoot you, I love you. And you think of the kind of online messages that young people are getting. Never before, another social experiment, at the click of a button, violent pornography can emerge for just about anybody, any age, and trying to make sense of what that is. This is the last one I'll show. It's just, you may not be able to see, but you see the big purple ball there? Just beside it, there's a little beige kind of malformed. That's the 7-year-old. And that's his bed, that green bed he was hiding under for an extended period of time in his room. So they're going to be 16, and in your classrooms, they'll be any age, and school may be the safest place that they have, or the only place that they have. And they're not going to say, hey, can I talk to you? I've really got this issue going on, and I don't really understand all the feelings that I have inside. I mean, if I did a show of hands, most of us couldn't say that we communicate that way, right? We have pretty strange ways of communicating how we're feeling. So they're just going to show you in all kinds of other ways, and it is our job as educators to kind of stretch towards them. And here's the good news, because I don't feel like so far I've been given a lot of good news. This is really good news. That social responses to people who experience adversity is the best indicator of how they're going to do. I'll explain what that means. So we're all social responders. Police are social responders. Family members are social responders. We used to think it was the level and the extremity of violence that someone experienced would let us know how well they're going to get over it or move along. But it isn't at all. It's the kind of social response they receive. So if I'm hurt by someone and I tell you, and you believe me, and you say, I'm so glad you told me, how brave and courageous. This isn't your fault that this happened, and we're going to try to get some help for you and your family. And then help does come and assistance happens. And maybe even imagine a world where the legal system responds so that there's consequences for a perpetrator. That person does really well. We are built to heal. Our skin heals when we cut it. Our heart heals when we're included in the human family. When we're seen and acknowledged in what's happened to us. We do fine. Kids do great. I see it all the time. We don't do fine if someone says, I don't believe you, you're lying, safety isn't given, there's no consequences, because that sets us outside of the social circle. But it isn't the extent or the extremity of the violence, it's how we're received. And that's why I feel hopeful, because you're in this room. You're a different generation of teachers than mine, and I was so educated by that earlier today. Some of these ideas aren't new to you. You've grown up with that adults are kind of messing up the planet. You may have grown up with the idea that we're interconnected, that mindfulness isn't something brand new to you. So this isn't about teachers being heroes and singularly saving children. I started talking about relationships, and I want to tell a brief story about a teaching I got from Doug White, who was the chief of the Nanaimo Nation at the time of his speaking. And I saw him introduce and welcome Alexandra Morton, who is a biologist and who is an activist against fish farms and the Broughtons, and he spoke at Malaspina University before it was VIU. And you know how sometimes you hear something, and you've heard it before, but you hear it again and it really lands? Like this time I got it, kind of. And he said, for many of you people, salmon are a delicious food that you love to have for dinner. But for us, we're related. They're our relatives. And I had heard all my relations said before, it kind of flew over my, like I didn't get it, that world view, we're related, connected in a way that my ancestry has forgotten so long ago. And we're infused with a kind of a capitalist and European mindset that people are over plants and animals, dominion on the planet, and that we're alone in what we do. That we can't ask for help, that we can't be vulnerable, that we can't say, I don't know what to do here. So instead of islands, right, we're forests, actually. We're forests connected to each other. And I believe, and that's why I feel so hopeful. And last night, I just want to say thank you for the wine and cheese. Also, Lucy, I meant to say that there was a lovely wine and cheese last night, and I got to talk to lots of people. In the era of teaching I was in, teachers were really afraid of other people coming into their classrooms. Little queendoms, little kingdoms. Don't come in and witness me, because you might see I'm kind of fumbling. You might see I kind of don't know what to do. Well, how would we know what to do? For goodness sakes. Teaching is such an incredible career, because it's not like, oh, I get it, I got it, I'm good, I'm done. You have new children, you have new things to think about, to deal, new ways to meet, new challenges, ways to reach out, to understand how someone else can learn. That's like a never-ending journey. So when would we ever think, I got it? I'm good at this, I don't need any more help, I don't need a new idea. And you're part of a generation of, I believe, young teachers that's changing that. That's gonna say, come on in, can you see how I'm doing this thing? Can I come into your room? Can you help me? Can we talk about ideas of what works and what doesn't? Because that's a colonial idea that you're all supposed to know individually and not get help and not be vulnerable and not totally make mistakes. Like give a grade 6 student, a terrible time because he's just enacting bullying that every adult on the planet or politician almost that we have enacts. I want to read to you something by this woman, Vicky Reynolds. She's a fabulous woman in Victoria, or Vancouver, on the downtown east side, a consultant. So she writes about counselors, but I'm shifting some of the language to be about teachers. In the teaching profession, burnout is constructed as an individual problem of teachers, which measures whether or not we're tough enough for the work. Burnout is backed up by ideas that our students can hurt us and impact us and burn us out. My students don't hurt me or harm me. They inspire, critique, teach, and inform me. Burnout denies that it's social structures of inequity and a lack of social justice that harm us in the classroom, the fact that families don't have safe housing, that they don't have breakfast. The problem is not in our heads or our hearts, but in the social world where our students live and struggle. The prescription for this individual weakness of burnout is often said to be self-care. I know self-care is important in order for us to bring hope into the classroom and to keep children and young people at the center. But it's a limiting idea. I do yoga and drink water, and I've not created one unit of housing in my homeless city. Self-care doesn't change the context of social injustice, which is where our children and youth live. When I speak of sustainability, I'm speaking to an engaging aliveness, a genuine connectedness with people and a presence of spirit. Solidarity and collective ethics invite us into collective care and resist the individualism that burnout constructs. So it's good if you're doing yoga and drinking water, but it's not enough. We need to connect, not only with the colleagues but with community members of support, people who work with children who experience violence, people who work with children who experience sexual abuse, people who work with young people who have disordered eating, LGBTQ two-spirit support groups. You are not alone in holding up children the way that you do and are and will. I'm inspired by you. I feel hopeful. And I really, really thank you very much for giving me your attention in this space today. But I do just want to, part of what I'm encouraged by, and probably we all are some of the young voices that are finding that we're hearing from on the planet right now. And these aren't young people, didn't just spring from nowhere. They had adults in their lives who, what were some of those words? Who were safe, who saw them as real people, who supported them, who inspired them. These are young people that we haven't seen before because they haven't been supported like they are being right now. And I know some of the faces are familiar, maybe not all of them are, but powerful. That's who you're working with, right? Incredibly powerful, inspiring young people. Greta has autism and selective mutism, right? If that was something that we were gonna limit her by, where would we be without her young voice on the planet telling us to wake up and get on with it? And there's so many. I mean, these are just some of the ones that I'm aware of. You probably have seen them in your rooms. So, yeah, I know that you will do what was done for you with those teachers. I know you will see these young people and give them the dignity and the respect that they so deserve. Now I really am done. Thank you.